Amen. Well, good afternoon, church. You know, for many of you that don't know me, my name is Bill, John. I eventually get to Kenny, but I introduce myself as so many different names, trying to fool people. I do that to try to stay out of trouble. So if you ever get that guy say, remember that guy, Bill? They was like, we don't have a Bill. Wasn't me. So, but no, it's pretty cool, you know, getting an opportunity to preach today. Share the service with you. Ken Burford and I love, you know, when Ken asks, do you want to do it together? It's pretty cool because I get to learn so much from him. The brother has a wealth of knowledge and information. He sends me over his stuff, and I instantly start changing my things around. I was like, I appreciate his knowledge. But we're going to continue with the book of John. For you that like slides, there won't be any today. I'm a guy that just likes to go off my notes and the Spirit. So the title of the lesson for you that want to take notes is The Light of the World. That's the title of the lesson today. We're going to have 2 points. I'm going to preach on the point of Jesus is the light, and Ken's going to preach on the point of we are the light. So those really are the 2 points we're going to preach on, and we're going to be coming out of the book of John, chapter 8. Is what we're going to be preaching out of. So if you want to go ahead and turn there, I want to share something with you. I thought of this concept, shall I speak. So I'm discovering my backyard. I shared this with someone shared with a group earlier today. I'm discovering my backyard. Kind of weird thing to say. I've been living in my house for 3.5 years, but I'm discovering my backyard. So I have a new puppy, and we had a puppy. I think we've had him now for 2 months. Her for 2 months. And she's developing the concept of making it through the night. So she's finally made it through the night till about 5:30 in the morning. So 5:30 in the morning, every morning for the last 2 months, I got to get up and take her outside. Luckily, I have another dog to kind of help train her a little bit. So I take her outside, and I'm sitting in my backyard. And what I'm discovering is we have a family of green parakeets that live in this tree right in my backyard. There was about 10 of them, and they are loud. They are very loud. But sitting out there, which has been cool, is sitting out there and sitting in the moment. So sitting in the moment of listening to the birds, and then this morning I was sitting out there listening to the birds, and I'm naming all the different species of birds that are flying around, making a bunch of noise, and sitting in the moment thinking, man, God, this is awesome. Like listening to the voices of nature. The birds that are chirping and singing, they're communicating with each other. I'm thinking, what are they saying to each other? Like, what would Adam and Eve been thinking sitting in the moment in the garden and just listening in the quiet and still of the moment? It's been enlightening for me because as I'm discovering sitting in my backyard, I was like, God, speak to me through nature. You know, I live far enough away where you can just barely hear the freeway going through, and I'm praying, God, please drown out that noise. Drown out the noise around me so I can just hear you in your creation. You know, and probably every other day you have the falcons and the hawks come flying through and the birds scattering everywhere. I'm like, whoa, that's pretty incredible. So God is amazing. We sit in a moment and ask him, man, just talk to me. Just talk to me. When we think of the light of the world, we think of that light wants us to sit in the illumination and just hear me. God is amazing. And I thought about that. When we think about the light of the world, we think of a light. If you think of like a light or something that's been there all your life, you think it's the sun. The sun's been there all my life. Since I was born, the sun is going to be there. It's going to be there for a long time. But that sun illuminates the darkness. You know, in the morning you get up and drive, unless you live in Alaska when there's more sunlight, sometimes a year, and less sunlight sometimes a year. But the sun is there. It lights up the darkness. When you think about the brightness of things that light makes clear. Jesus being the light of the world gives clarity to darkness. When we think about that sunlight that's been there all of our lives, do you take that sunlight for granted? except unless you live in Arizona, it's hot. But we think about the sunlight, and it's there. We don't think anything of it. It's like it's just there. It's always been there. Well, think about Jesus. How do you view Jesus as being the light? He's there. He's always been there. Do we take it for granted that he's the light that exposes our life? It's like a gift. You remember getting that gift, and someone gives you a gift, and you're like, "Oh yeah, thank you. I want to open it up." Like my wife will probably say, "The precious," but we get that gift, and we think, "Man, I'm excited." It creates joy. It creates emotional attachment to the person that gives you that gift and that excitement. And then the next day, then a week later, then a month later. Then a year later, that excitement, that joy wanes. It's like far removed. Far removed. So when we think about that light that Jesus gives us in our life today, we can be excited about like he's the light of the world. And then tomorrow comes, and the next day comes, and the next day. And we're far removed from that. And we think, why isn't it the same? In John chapter 8, verse 12, it says, I'm going to be reading quite a bit of text today. It's from John 8, 12 to 30, and Ken's going to be doing 31 to 59. So I'm going to be skimming through and kind of pointing out different scriptures as we go. In verse 12, it says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Think about never walking in darkness. We have the moon that comes out at night. We have the stars that come out at night. It illuminates the darkness. Jesus says he gives you a promise that he reveals he is a source of spiritual illumination. Because I think sometimes we think darkness and we think of like, I can't see in this dark place. But spiritually, we have issues with seeing spiritually the truth of things in our life. We think spiritually, he reveals the light and truth of God, spiritual, that helps us from being blind. Because it's easy to say, someone was sharing in our group the other day, it's like, I want to work on my blind spots. That's a tough one. When you think of like, help me with my blindness. For many of you that are disciples that know, when Jesus or God helps you with something, it's pretty like, okay, maybe don't help me so much. Help me a little bit. But that spiritual light that he's talking about is not just about the darkness of dark and light. It is really the world we live in is a dark place. The confusion of the spiritual realm is a dark place. The falsehood, the moral failures all around us in our lives, and including us. Because sometimes we can say, the world, Satan, this and that, but my own soul of who I am, my core, is in spiritual blindness. I need that light. I must have that light, but he gives me that light as he reveals it with a promise. I am promising you, with me, you won't live in darkness. Man, I don't know if it's encouraging to you, but to think that like, I cannot live blind spiritually. It's revealing. Someone was asking me the other day, how are you been doing? Early in the service, I was like, it's been pretty awesome to think that God can speak to me through anything I do. It's whether or not I choose to listen. Because he's going to speak, but if I'm blind, I won't hear it. That's the promise that he says to us. In John chapter 1, verse 4 through 5, it says, I am life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So no matter what our dark moments are, there's always an if, we choose that light, he promises that he will shine through the darkness. And that darkness will not overcome it. There's a sense of freedom in that. I'm not sure for me even, I quite understand like the freedom in seeing that promise that Jesus says that I will never walk in darkness. Thanks, Terry. Because we think about, I'm a person that says that we should never say absolutes. Always, never. You know, for people that talk to me a lot of time, I don't like absolutes. But this is an absolute I can count on. Like, you can count on this absolute. Because typically, from a humanistic aspect, absolutes are based on my perception. Jesus' absolutes based on truth. There is no other alternative. There is no other perception. It is truth. So his promise tells us that the darkness that he's trying to wane out of in our life is our ignorance to how powerful he can be in your life. Because I think I have great knowledge of all the things and all the wisdom I can read all the textbooks and study all I want, but he's trying to tell you, even in that, you are in darkness. Let me help you walk in light. I want to be able to show you what separates you from my Father. I want to be able to show you the direction that he has planned for your life. That light cannot be extinguished. That light is all-consuming. It burns everything it touches. But you got to choose to let it touch the core of who you are. That's the toughest part of it. Ephesians 5 says, for you were once in darkness, but now you are in light. In the Lord, live as children in the light. Wow. Like in the Lord, live as children in the light, because I promise you, I will be there and you will always have me. You know, in this chapter, you know, we see from a humanistic Pharisee aspect, you know, they decided, I want to challenge you now, Jesus. Like, what you're proclaiming is like, no one has that authority. Like, what are you talking about? If you turn in verse 13, it says, the Pharisees challenged him. Here you are appearing as your own witness. Your testimony is not valid. Whoa, okay. I am now telling Jesus you're not valid. That's a pretty powerful statement. But for them culturally, it was you have a witness, you know, someone testify, and you have a witness to validate your testimony. They didn't understand. They didn't understand his father. His father was his witness. They didn't understand his authority, because if you look in verse 18, it says, I am one who testifies for myself. My other witness is the Father who sent me. Wow. So he sent him to be the light in your life. He sent him, as Nacho talked about, that the death that he went through to be able to give us the ability and the hope to walk free of darkness. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about that ability to respond to the world and the conventional thinking in ways that they're like, who is this person? Like, this does not sound right. Because his words are true. His path is true. His light is everlasting. That's not what we normally think about in our lives. We have our day-to-day life. We go about our lives day to day. I am one. I get up in the morning. I get to spend some time with my dogs, clean up the backyard, which is a nightmare. You know, get prepared for work, getting work, doing my job. I get home. I got a wife, I got grandkids, and, you know, got Bible talk. So the busyness of the schedule of life, the light is there in all of it. The light is there in all of it. the ability to grow spiritually is there in all of it. Matthew 7 says, I'll say some of these scriptures at the end because I know I'm saying them pretty quick. In Matthew 7, 28 through 29, it says, when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowd were amazed at his teaching because he taught as one who had authority, and this is the part I really love, and not as their teachers of the law. Because see, for them, the teachers of the law, for those that were there listening, the teachers of the law were very eloquent in their ability to teach law, to teach this is what we should and shouldn't be doing. But Jesus was teaching something totally different. He was teaching like, I need your heart. Walk in my light. What does that mean, Jesus? So for those that were there listening, he was saying to them, come to me and I will be your Savior. Come to me and I will be your light. Come to me and I will give you direction. Come to me and I will give you rest. That is not what they were learning. So for them, they were like, what is going on? So when you think about light and Jesus being a light in your core, in the inner of who you are, what does that represent in your life? What does that have the ability to change? Because in this chapter, this first 12 verses, you have a promise, a revealing, a challenge, and a mission. When I thought about that mission part of this in verse 28 through 30, it was unveiling like, I'm going to a place you can't go. What do you mean? No, you're human, I'm human. Why can't I just follow you and go in my humanistic thinking? That's what I think. But he was trying to help them to see. Even in all of his preaching, even in all his abilities to, because part of this conversation was he was teaching. He had already shown them mercy because a woman had been brought to him caught in adultery. So in a conversation, he was already teaching them. So in this moment, they were like, well, where are you going that we can't go? Because they didn't understand yet. So he had to make it clear for them that in verse 30 it says, even, correction, verse 28 says, when you lift up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he. So he's kind of already talking about what's going to happen to him, his crucifixion. He's like, but then you will know after you kill me? Oh, Jesus, okay, hold on a second. Why we got to wait till we kill you? But that's the human aspect of them. They were so against who he was and what he represented, it opposite the law. They said, when I die, when you see me, lift it up because you do it, then you will understand. Wow. Sometimes for us, it takes that. Sometimes it takes us being knocked down and like, kids like, okay, God, I have a saying in my life. You have two ways to come to God. Humbly on your own, or God can humble you. Right. And typically when he humbles you, it's pretty painful. Been there. I've been there. But that's sometimes how we think as humans. We need that sometimes for God to say, listen, you're not getting it. And we go through things. And we all do. But that's the beauty of the light. The beauty of the light, because there's so much healing in that light. Like Nacho talked about that cross and what that cross represents. It represents a whole lot of things that sometimes that we don't understand. And even I don't. So when we think about this in chapter 8, verse 12 through 30, as I was studying this out, I had to ask myself the question, what light in my own life is Jesus shedding? What darkness that needs to be revealed in my life? Because there's blind spots in my own life personally. What are the things of Jesus that goes against my conventional thinking? It goes against what I think should and shouldn't be. Because what happens is when you get that gift and you get so far removed, my own self gets involved in how I perceive God's truth. So my own conventional thought gets in the way. And what does it save me from? It saves me from so much, more than I probably can even comprehend. And I think that's the thing for us as disciples, and for those that aren't disciples that are visiting today, talk to somebody. This light that reveals, it illuminates, is powerful. It is powerful. So we got to see and make sure as Ken's comes up to help us to see us being the light of the world. Jesus is that light, and he is the gift of the world. Thank you.
So this is the second time recently that Kenny and I have done a lesson together. And I really like doing that. I really like Kenny. I like his big smile. And I like the energy and the fresh perspective that he brings to the lessons that I've heard him do here. Sometimes on Wednesday nights when the men get together. And it's just a pleasure to be able to do a lesson with him and team up. We've discovered we make a pretty good team. We interact really well. And just appreciate the words that he had to share on Jesus being the light. So I'm going to talk about we are the light. So the Gospel of John, which we've spent a great deal of time in this year, the Gospel of John poses 3 key questions to us. And I'm glad we don't have the slides and all that stuff, because I want you to write these down if you are old school like me and use pen and paper, or, enter them into your device, send yourself a text message, whatever you do. Because if you don't, you won't remember it. If you write it down and you spend some time thinking about it and you interact with somebody right after or soon after, you'll remember it, and it will help you put it into practice. So first question is, what was in the beginning? Second question, who is Jesus? Third question, what does Jesus have to do with me? Or to kind of turn that around, what do I have to do with Jesus? John says, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were created through him, and that Word, as Kenny just told us, was the light of the world. That Word was Jesus. John, in commenting on this himself in his first letter, the first of his 3 letters, the very beginning of 1 John says, that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked at and our hands have touched. This we proclaim to you concerning the word of life. The life appeared, and we have seen it and testified, and we proclaim to you the eternal life which was with the Father and has appeared to us. John got to touch and hear and walk with, side by side, in the flesh, Jesus, the light of the world. We get that same light through what he wrote and what he shared, and through our fellowship with others, and through making the connection that we can make spiritually with God, with Jesus. Who is Jesus? Jesus is the Word. Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus is the Messiah, the Savior King that God had promised to come into the world. He is the King who saves us to be in his kingdom. He's not just a Savior that just kind of died for us so that we could be forgiven and go to heaven. He is the King who died for us so that we would be qualified to live in his kingdom, do his will. So what does he have to do with us? What do we have to do with him? That's what Jesus is talking about in this passage in John 8. John 8:12, Kenny read it. Jesus says, I am the light of the world. He says, whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So Jesus calls us to follow him, to walk in his light. John went on to say in 1 John chapter 1, verses 5 and 7, this is the message we have heard from him and declare to you. God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. If we claim to have fellowship with him and yet walk in darkness, we lie and do not live out the truth. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his son, purifies us from all sin. Jesus has called us the light of the world. Matthew 5, verses 14, 16, he says, you are the light of the world. Let your light shine before others so that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So the question is, how are we light? How can we be this light? Verse 30 of John chapter 8 is a really cool verse. Because as Kenny described, as he read, so Jesus gets into this conversation with this group of Jewish leaders. And Jesus has been talking to a crowd of people, teaching a crowd of people. And these guys come along and start to challenge Jesus. And so the crowd is now listening, not to just Jesus talk and teach, but to the debate that's going on between Jesus and these guys. At the end of it, it says that many of the Jews who heard him believed in him. So to me, it's like this. You got this group of the crowd. Maybe some of them sided with the leaders. Maybe some of them didn't know what to think. But some of them say, you know what? I think I agree with this guy Jesus, you know? It's like we've heard, candidates debate in the election season. You know, they're kind of listening and they go, so who am I going to pick here? I think I like Jesus. I like what he had to say. That's pretty impressive, you think? So, John chapter 8, verse 31, Jesus says, okay, that's great. That's really good that you believe in me. Now, it says, to the Jews who had believed in him, okay, to that group, he says, if, big if you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So this is an often quoted statement by Jesus. I don't know. I guess it's still there, I don't know. But way back a long time ago when I was a college student, and I didn't go to college there, but I was visiting there, I was on the campus of the University of Texas in Austin. And they got a big, huge, impressive library. And it says, you will know the truth. Actually, it's in King James. You shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. I don't know if that building's still there or not. It may have been torn down. They've got some big high-rise library now. I don't know. Jesus is talking about whether or not we're really followers of him when he talks about knowing the truth. So I'm not going to read the rest of that chapter. I'm just going to jump to the end, because at the end of this chapter, these guys, these Jews who said, we picked Jesus, were ready to pick up stones to stone him to death. You go, whoa, how did that happen? You know? How do you go from saying, wow, I think I believe in Jesus, to I think I'm just going to stone him to death? That's crazy. That's messed up. So the answer to that is they were stuck. They believed in him for a moment, but in the end of the day, they were stuck in their own belief system and traditions. They were of the world. Jesus talked a lot about being of the world and not of the world, living in the world but not being like the world. Their problem was they were stuck in their traditions. They were offended when Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." They said, "What are you talking about, Jesus? We're already free. We're sons of Abraham." So they thought, because I am a descendant of the great father Abraham, I'm cool with God. I go through the rituals. I obey the law. I go to I do the sacrifices. I keep the Sabbath. I do all this stuff. Now, why are you telling me that I need to, do what you say, and, then I'll be free and know the truth? That's what they were thinking. They believed, but only for a moment. And a lot of people today believe, but only for a moment, because when the nitty-gritty comes and the time for obedience comes, it's like, where did the faith go? We hold on to our traditions. We hold on to our worldly way of thinking, be it religious or be it non-religious. And oftentimes, it's more dangerous, in fact, and entrenching to be religious than non-religious. We can say, well, what are you talking to me about my life and how my life is messed up, I mean, I'm in the Church of Christ. I knew so-and-so, and I know so-and-so. There's a brother visiting from Atlanta today, and he's talking about Tom Brown, who's like the evangelist in Atlanta forever. I knew Tom when he was a student at the University of Florida, and he came out after graduating, got in ministry, and did some retreats from us. And I remember Tom doing a lesson one time where he's from Isaiah, and he's talking about the Jews would say, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. And the prophet is just ripping them because they're unfaithful to the Lord whose temple it was, And Tom said, some of the Jews were saying, yeah, we're the temple of the Lord. We're the temple of the Lord, temple of the Lord. And he said, we can say, I'm in the Church of Christ. I'm in the Church of Christ. I'm in the Church of Christ. And I thought, wow, that's pretty insightful. That's pretty bold. That's kind of guy that Tom was, still is, even if he's retired. I'm sure he'll still be preaching somewhere, just like me. Every now and then they'll turn you loose and let you go again. So we have to hold to Jesus' teachings, not just believe them, not just say, well, I'm a Christian. So I've read a whole lot of articles, the last 2 or 3 years about the declining of Christianity in the United States. So fewer people identify as Christians, although a majority still do. And a very significant percentage, perhaps a majority of those who identify as Christians, identify in some manner or another as evangelical Christianity, or evangelical Christians. The fact of the matter is, the Pew Research Center, you may have heard of it, you may not. It's one of the main research centers in the entire United States and is often quoted. In fact, I've heard it quoted in some of the political messages this season. So recent study, this was done, I believe, in 2019, a significant percentage, I don't remember the exact percentage, very, very significant percentage of people who identified as evangelical Christians rarely went to church. I had one several years ago who was my legal secretary. She identified as a Christian. She talked a lot. But She never went to church. It's just not part of her life. It's kind of a head scratcher, you know. Now, it's not just about going to church, because you can believe and you can show up at church even all the time and still not be the light of the world. The fact that we come to church doesn't make us the light of the world. It just makes us weird people who go to church. To those who don't go to church, they wonder why we're wasting our time, when we could be home wasting our time watching stupid NFL football games. They don't mean a thing in the end of the day. We hold to Jesus' teachings. And Jesus' teachings are, first of all, I'm going to cover a few points here, and I'm trying to get through them very quickly. Holding to Jesus' teachings means that we have a relationship with him. Jesus' teachings are primarily relational. John said in 1 John, we're writing these things so that we may have fellowship with the Father and the Son and with one another. The core is all about love. Love God, love one another. That's how we are the light. Jesus says, by this you will know, all men will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. John recorded that Jesus' statement to the apostles there during the Last Supper and right before he's getting ready to be crucified. This is how they're going to know that you're my disciples, that you guys love one another, that we love one another. In his prayer to God, which is recorded in John 17, he says, Father, I pray that those who believe in me will be one, so that the world may know that you and I are one. It's by our love, by our unity, that people know that we are Christ followers, and then we become the light of the world. Ryan shared about how an aunt of his who was at the memorial service for his mom recently was just amazed and still talks about even now just the love and outpouring from, you know, the people that she met from this group of believers, from this congregation. That's being the light of the world. In 1 John 2:6, John wrote, whoever claims to live in him, that is in Jesus, must live or walk as Jesus did. We not only obey his teachings, we walk as he walked. We embrace his values. We embrace his character, and we seek to be like him. We imitate him. We don't just listen to him and put it into practice. We imitate him. That is how we become light to the world, because in doing that, then, we love one another and we're unified. We're on the same page because we're following Jesus. You know, it almost becomes just trite to talk about all of the crazy diversity and all the, you know, disagreements and divisiveness in the country and in the world politically and socially and every other way. When we come together in love and fellowship and in unity, it makes a difference. People can see that. People can sense that. And this is a love that we have for one another that is kind, that is patient, that is good, that is persistent, that is gentle, that is compassionate. You know, most of those are taken from the fruit of the Spirit, Galatians 5. Talks about love and these qualities that describe love. And he talks about in the context of joy and peace. It's love that has these characteristics that brings into our lives joy and peace, because it brings us into a relationship with God, with Jesus, and with one another. This love is also a very radical love, by the way. In Matthew chapter 5, toward the end of the chapter, Matthew 5, 6, and 7 is, Sermon on the Mount. Sermon on the Mount is a good place to start if you want a good look at Jesus and his values and his character and what his fundamental basic commands are. You take a deep dive, a deep personal evaluation dive into those 3 chapters of the Sermon on the Mount, and you'll get the core of this lesson, what it means to be you're the light of the world, and you'll understand why Jesus says you're the salt of the earth, you're the light of the world. Jesus says, you've heard him say, love your neighbors, love your friends, but I say to you, love your enemies. Now that's a tough one. Sometimes it's tough just loving one another in the body. Sometimes just loving family, He says, love your enemies. Well, what do you mean, Jesus? He says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Then he says in same kind of context in Luke 6, and do good to them. Paul, the Apostle Paul, picks this up, and in Romans chapter 12, he talks about doing good to all people by actively engaging. It's not just putting up with them. It's like actively embracing and engaging people to do good in return for evil. Probably you've heard examples of that, ton of sermons, maybe, that you can testify to yourself. But this is a radical love. Jesus says, do not resist an evil person. Turn your cheek, give them your shirt, go the extra mile. That's being light. Being a nice guy is not nice, is not light. It's nice, but it's not being a light. Being a churchgoer's a good thing, but it's not light. Loving people, praying for people, doing good for people who hate you, who oppose you, that you can't stand, that's being light. So this love is a radical love. I'm going to end with 2 quick points that, for me, can be really challenging, especially the second one of these 2. Jesus also said in the Sermon on the Mount, let your yes be yes and your no, no. Okay? What does that mean? That means if you are asked a question that has a yes or no answer, and you answer yes, it's true. And if you answer no, that's true. It also means if somebody asks you, will you do this for me? And you say yes, you do it. Or if for some reason you can't, you contact them, you apologize profusely, and explain why you can't do it. It means that you are reliable. People can count on you. You want to make a difference at work? Do what you say you're going to do. Most of you know I practiced law for a lot of years. I had a lot of clients say, you actually do what you said you're going to do. It's like, well, yeah, is that surprising? I mean, literally, it's kind of shocking that was surprising to them. A lot of people don't have a very high regard for attorneys. Some of us actually do what we say we're going to do in the best way that we can for the benefit of our clients. That's called integrity in the world. In the kingdom of God, it's called simply being like Jesus. You're a truthful person. Paul wrote in Ephesians chapter 4 or 5, somewhere in there. Read it. It's whole book, whole letter is really good. He says, speak the truth in love. You tell the truth. You speak the truth. A couple of quick things about speaking the truth. One is, when you need to speak truth, especially a hard truth to somebody, do so in love. Do so with humility, with gentleness. It'll go over a lot better. My wife and I have kind of an ongoing joke that sometimes we speak the truth in truth. And what we mean by that is what's being said is true, but the spirit in which it's being said is not consistent with the truth of Jesus. It's just not loving. Speak the truth in love, but also make sure we're speaking the truth. Make sure that when we tell somebody some advice spiritually, it comes from the Word, not just from something else that no telling where that came from. That when we make a statement of fact, when we make a statement of real opinion, I don't care what it is, whether it's about, religious issues, whether it's about cultural issues, whether it's about political issues, tell the truth. Do your homework. There's a lot of stuff out there, okay? What's true, what's not true. I love the fact now that there are these fact-checking sites. You kind of go there. So so-and-so said this, is that true? Well, they'll do a fact check for you. Hopefully they're, giving you the right facts, but, we have a responsibility, if we're going to pass on information as true, to make sure it's true. Now, we may be wrong, but we need to make a reasonable investigation to vet whether or not this is really true before we pass it on. Otherwise, we just become another contributor to conspiracy theories about this, that, or the other. Speak the truth in love. People are being told a lot of stuff religiously every day and have been ever since, forever. People are told a lot of stuff that simply is not true. They are. It's our job to speak the truth in love. And finally, Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6, and this will really make a difference in the world, maybe more than anything else, I think, except for our love and our unity together. He says, don't lay up for yourself treasures on earth, but lay up yourself for treasures in heaven. Paul said, again, referencing some of his comments in Ephesians 4, he's talking about changing your life. He says, the thief must learn not to steal. Well, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? But he takes it further. He says, but must learn how to earn a living so that he will have enough for himself and also to share with others. So a person who makes just enough for himself but never has enough to share with others is still a thief at heart. So the point for us that I want to make that truly will be a light to the world, it is a light to the world. People notice this stuff because our world our country especially, is so materialistic. I would like to think that I'm not materialistic, but in reality, I know I am because I'm an American. And by definition, those of us who are at least middle class, certainly upper middle class, I guess I would consider myself in that category at some level. We look at, like the Elon Musk of the world who have billions, and we're like, well, I'm poor. No, you're not. Compare yourself to somebody that's a typical person living in India, places like that. I remember a brother saying, not that long ago actually, that there was a brother visiting from India, and he said, I can't bring my Indian brothers and sisters here to visit with you Americans because they would all be just disillusioned because of the way we live. So the principle that Paul's communicating in Ephesians and that Jesus is communicating here is we need to live, and this is the way I've put it for a long time, live below your means. One of the things that drives so much debt and anxiety in our society is everybody's trying to live just another step above their means. I remember having a conversation at lunch one day with Gordon Ferguson. Most of you know who at least Gordon Ferguson is, if you don't know him personally. And Gordon said to me, Ken, we're killing ourselves by this philosophy of get the most house for the money. And I thought, wow, that's right. So, you know, a call comes to give through hope for the hurricane victims. By the way, you can go to hopeworldwide.org or whatever it is and find that. I get weekly email messages, sometimes more than once a week, from both Disciples Today and Hope Worldwide. And it's really valuable. It's really valuable information. And also, you always have opportunities to donate, especially to Hope, by doing that. It's a good way to stay in touch and to donate. But live below your means. Now, in this group, I'm aware there are probably some of you that are barely able to live within your means. You're not the folks I'm talking to. I'm talking to those of us who can live well and still have a lot to share. That you do that by living below your means. You know, and you've got extra funds around, you've got a promotion, you get a raise. You know, a lot of times think about, well, I pick up that new car, get, you know, maybe that bigger house. Now, how about just staying where you are? Or maybe even downsizing. Debbie and I, since I retired from full-time work when I'm actually earning money, we've been like on this downsizing trend. And it's really good. One, it keeps us out of debt. It keeps us not fretting over whether or not we have enough for retirement, but also having plenty to share with others. That's light. People take notice of that. People in the world notice these things. They pay attention to how we live. You know, if you live in a neighborhood and somebody says, wow, you know, you could probably live in a bigger house and you don't, that gets their attention. Maybe they'll listen to what you have to say. Because ultimately, we are the light of the world by taking the gospel to the world. But we also need to make sure that we're living it out in our lives as we, and even before we take it to the world. So Jesus is the light. We are the light of the world. So let's stay in touch with Jesus, who is the light, and go out and continue to be the light ourselves. So, Dixon, where are you, brother? Dixon, who's new here, he and his wife recently moved here. He led singing last week. Really loved the way he led singing. So I asked him to lead us all in singing This Little Light of Mine. Okay? Everybody got your finger ready to go? Put it up. You know, like Vacation Bible School, this little light of mine, all right? Everybody stand up. After this song is over, that will be the end of our service.